My detective husband stayed out all night. When I told the nurse I had no family, he panicked. Chapter 1: The Empty Chair. When I woke, the chair beside my hospital bed was empty. Dawn had not quite reached Denver. The sky beyond the narrow window was the color of wet concrete, and the city lights still burned in the distance. An 4-pump clicked beside me with patient, mechanical precision. My mouth tasted like metal. My lower abdomen throbbed beneath the blanket, not sharply anymore, but with a deep, exhausted ache that seemed to belong to someone much older than me. A nurse stepped in carrying a fresh bag of fluids. She checked the monitor, then glanced at the empty chair. "Did your husband go get coffee?" I looked at the ceiling. "I don't know." Her hands paused over the tubing. "You had a major procedure last night. Someone should stay with you, especially after a pregnancy loss." "He has work." I said it automatically. I had said those words so many times that they no longer felt like language. They were an incantation, a password, the price of being married to Lieutenant Ethan Hayes of the Denver Police Department's Homicide Unit. "He has work." He was on call. There was a scene. The suspect moved. The city needed him. At 2 in the morning, curled on our bathroom floor with blood soaking through my pajama pants, I had called Ethan and told him something was terribly wrong. He had been inside a warehouse command post, coordinating the arrest of a man suspected of killing 2 women. I could hear radios crackling behind him. "Nora, call 911, he had said. "I can't leave right this second. I'm scared." "I know. The ambulance will get there faster than I can." Then someone shouted his name, and the call ended. He had been right about the ambulance. It arrived in 7 minutes. He had been right that the case was urgent. He had been right about many things. None of them changed the fact that I had signed consent forms alone while an obstetrician explained that our baby, 18 weeks, 3 days, could not be saved. I had labored in a room with the lights dimmed and a social worker holding my hand because my husband was still working. The nurse finished changing the 4 bag. Her expression softened, but pity was worse than judgment. I turned my face toward the window. My phone sat on the bedside table. No missed calls. No messages. A little after 7, it finally rang. "Ethan." I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. On the 3rd attempt, I powered the phone off. 20 minutes later, the door opened so fast it struck the stopper. Ethan stood there in yesterday's white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie gone, holster still clipped at his waist. His dark hair was flattened on one side as though he had dragged both hands through it 100 times. His eyes were bloodshot. There was a smear of dirt near his collar and a small cut across one knuckle. The moment he saw me awake, his shoulders dropped. "You're up." I said nothing. He came closer and reached for my hand. I slid it beneath the blanket. His fingers closed on empty air. "Nora." His voice roughened. "I'm sorry." The arrest went bad. He had a hostage, and then internal affairs locked down everyone's phones because there was a leak. I got here as soon as. "It's over." He froze. "The baby is gone," I said. "You know that." His face drained of color. "The doctor called me after the procedure." "Good. I should have been here." "Yes." The answer came so simply that he looked startled. For years, Ethan had apologized with explanations attached, and I had accepted the explanations before he reached the apology. I knew the department's staffing shortages. I knew the statistics on homicide clearance rates. I knew what it meant when a lieutenant was responsible not only for a case, but for every detective standing in the line of fire. I also knew what it meant to lose a child with no familiar hand to hold. His phone rang. He stared at the screen. Detective Marcus Reed, his second in command. Ethan silenced it. "It could be important," I said. I'm staying. The phone rang again. I turned my head toward the window. Answer it. Nora. Answer it, Ethan. Work is important. Something in my tone made him flinch. He picked up. Marcus's voice carried through the quiet room. Lieutenant, we found the suspect's second vehicle. Patrol's got eyes on it near Aurora. We need you here before the warrant team moves. Ethan closed his eyes. I could see the decision happen before he spoke. Duty won because duty always won, and because I had trained him to believe I would survive whatever was left over. I'll be there in 20, he said. When he ended the call, he stayed beside the bed for another minute. I'll come back. I nodded politely, the way I would have nodded to a physician telling me rounds would resume in the afternoon. He left. The door clicked shut, and something inside me went quiet. My best friend, Lena Ortiz, arrived near noon carrying coffee, a phone charger, and enough anger for both of us. She was a pediatric physical therapist with a habit of wearing bright earrings and saying what everyone else was too cautious to say. Where is he? She demanded. Working. Of course he is. She set the coffee down harder than necessary. You lost your baby last night. Our baby. Does he know that? I looked at her. Her face softened immediately. She sat beside me and took my hand, the same hand Ethan had failed to reach. Nora, come stay with me when they discharge you. I can go home. To what? An empty house and a man who texts you from crime scenes? He has a difficult job. So do trauma surgeons. So do firefighters. So do nurses. Most of them still understand the concept of an emergency contact. I stared at the pale band on my ring finger. Lena squeezed my hand. You don't have to decide anything today. But stop protecting him from the truth of what he did. That evening, Ethan sent a message. I may be tied up overnight. Please rest. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Then I opened my contacts and changed his name from husband to Ethan Hayes. I removed him from my medical emergency contacts and added Lena. I deleted the photograph that appeared when he called, the two of us on our wedding day, laughing beneath a shower of white rose petals. When the screen went blank, my reflection stared back at me. I did not look heartbroken. I looked tired. For the first time, I understood that exhaustion could be a form of clarity. Before Lena arrived, a hospital social worker named Denise came in with a folder of resources. She spoke gently about grief groups, leave paperwork, funeral options, and what the hospital called disposition of remains. The clinical phrasing struck me harder than anything else had. Rowan had existed inside me for 18 weeks, and now a form required me to choose between private burial, communal cremation, and release to a funeral home. Would you like your husband included in the decision? Denise asked. I looked at the empty chair. He is unavailable. She did not press. She explained each option twice because I kept losing the thread. In the end, I chose the hospital's memorial cremation and accepted a small white box containing footprints, a bracelet, and the knitted hat. I signed every page alone. That was the detail Ethan would later remember with the most shame, not because paperwork mattered more than the loss, but because there had been ordinary decisions surrounding death, and he had left me to carry every one of them. When Lena finally entered, she found the box beside me. She read Rowan's name on the card and lowered herself into the chair without speaking. We sat together until the daylight strengthened. Her presence did not repair anything. It simply proved that grief became survivable when another person agreed to remain in the room. Chapter 2: A Marriage on Mute. I stayed in the hospital for 4 days. Ethan came twice. The first visit lasted 23 minutes. The second lasted 11. He brought flowers the second time, white lilies from the hospital gift shop. I was allergic to lilies. He had known that when we were dating, because on our third date he had moved an entire vase from our restaurant table after I started sneezing. I looked at the flowers and realized he had not chosen them. He had purchased the idea of flowers. "I'm late," he said. "I was eating broth and crackers." "You're here now." He pulled the chair closer. "The case is almost finished." I nodded. "Nora, can you stop saying everything like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're talking to a stranger." I set down the spoon. "What would you prefer?" "Tell me you're angry." "I'm tired." "Yell at me." "Would yelling bring the baby back?" His jaw tightened. "No." "Would it make you leave the next crime scene?" He hesitated. That hesitation answered more honestly than anything else could. His phone vibrated. This time he ignored it. It vibrated again. "You should answer," I said. "I can call them back. If someone has been hurt, you'll resent me for keeping you here." "I would not." "You already do." He stared at me. I had never said it aloud before, but I had felt it in every clipped reply when I called during a shift, every sigh when I asked whether he would be home for dinner, every distracted glance at his phone during anniversaries and holidays. Ethan believed he loved me. I believed him. But somewhere along the way, he had begun treating my needs as obstacles placed between him and the version of himself he admired most, the relentless detective, the dependable commander, the man who never abandoned a case. He had abandoned a person instead. When the phone vibrated a third time, he answered. Marcus's voice came through. A warrant hearing had been moved up. A prosecutor needed Ethan immediately. He stood before the call even ended. "I'll be back tonight." "You don't have to promise." His hand tightened around the phone. "I want to." "That has never been the problem." He left. Lena picked me up at discharge. Ethan was in Colorado Springs interviewing a witness. He texted that my mother could drive me home, as though assigning a substitute completed the responsibility. My mother did come. She looked 10 years older than she had a week earlier and spent most of the drive telling me not to make permanent decisions while grieving. "Ethan's work saves lives," she said. "You always knew what he did." "I knew what he did. I didn't know I would stop existing whenever he did it." "He loves you." "I know." The certainty in my own voice surprised me. Love was not the question anymore. My mother wanted me to return to the townhouse Ethan and I had bought 3 years earlier. Instead, I went to Lena's condo. "Just for a few days," I said. Lena did not challenge the lie. She made up the guest room, placed pain medication and water on the nightstand, and taped a note to the door that read, "You are allowed to need things." I cried when I saw it. Not loudly. The tears simply slipped down my face while Lena stood in the hallway pretending not to notice until I reached for her. For the next week, Ethan texted every morning. "Did you sleep? Have you eaten? When are you coming home?" I answered in the shortest possible sentences. "Yes. Yes. I don't know." He mistook my calm for recovery. By the 9th day, the messages slowed. By the 12th, they were reduced to a single good night sent sometime after midnight. He had never said good night when we shared a bed because he was rarely there before I fell asleep. 3 weeks after the loss, I returned to our townhouse to collect clothes. The living room smelled faintly of beer and takeout. A cardboard container sat open on the coffee table beside an evidence manual. The house was clean in the impersonal way a hotel room was clean, no dishes, no laundry, no warmth. In the bedroom, our wedding photograph remained on the nightstand. Ethan was smiling in it, a rare unguarded smile that had once convinced me I was the safest person in his world. I picked up the frame. Then I put it face down. I moved into Lena's spare room for another month, then rented a 1-bedroom apartment near St. Catherine Medical Center, where I worked as a senior laboratory scientist. The place was 600 square feet, with old hardwood floors and a kitchen barely wide enough for one person. It was the first home I had ever chosen entirely for myself. Ethan called when he heard. "Why did you sign a lease?" "Because I need somewhere to live." "You have somewhere to live. The townhouse is where you sleep between cases." "It hasn't felt like my home in a long time." He exhaled heavily. "Nora, what are we doing?" "I'm resting." "From me?" "From waiting." Silence. "I'm finishing this case," he said. "After that, I'll take time off." "You said that after the Grant Street murders. And after the motel shooting. And after the courthouse threat. This one is different. They are all different. The result is the same." He lowered his voice. "Are you leaving me?" "I don't know." It was the truth, and it frightened him more than anger would have. For the first month in the apartment, I moved through life carefully. I went back to the laboratory. I ran blood panels, reviewed quality control reports, and worked occasional overnight shifts. Numbers and samples behaved logically. They did not promise to return and fail to arrive. At home, I cooked for one. I bought yellow curtains because Ethan had always preferred gray. I put a plant on the windowsill and learned that the building's radiator clanged at precisely 4:12 every morning. Sometimes grief came quietly. Other times it ambushed me. One evening at the grocery store, a toddler in the checkout line begged his mother for gummy bears. She laughed, kissed his hair, and added the candy to the cart. I abandoned my groceries and made it to the parking lot before my knees weakened. Our baby would not have been born yet. I knew that. Grief did not care about calendars. It gave me visions of a child who had never taken a breath, dark curls like Ethan, my mother's dimple, a red winter coat, small boots near the front door. I cried beside a row of shopping carts until I could breathe again. That night, Ethan texted, "Are you coming home this weekend?" I stared at the message. "Which home?" I almost wrote. Instead, I turned off the phone. The silence in my apartment did not hurt as much as the silence beside him had. The apartment also changed the way I understood money. Ethan and I had always deposited our paychecks into one account. He earned more, but I handled the mortgage, utilities, insurance renewals, and household purchases. He believed that because he never restricted my spending, our finances were equal. In reality, I knew the cost of every necessity while he knew only the balance. For the first time, I opened an account in my own name. I redirected my salary, calculated a budget, and paid rent from money no one else could monitor. The act was not secretive. I emailed Ethan the updated household numbers and offered to keep contributing to the mortgage until we decided what to do with the townhouse. He replied within minutes, "You do not need permission to use your own paycheck." I stared at the sentence. It was correct and still revealed how badly our marriage had trained both of us. He thought granting freedom sounded supportive. I had nearly asked for it. At work, routine gave me back a sense of competence. I supervised validation of a new blood analyzer, corrected a calibration problem, and trained 2 younger scientists. No one there knew me primarily as a detective's wife or a woman who had lost a baby. They knew I could find an error hidden in 1,000 clean numbers. That identity became a railing I held while the rest of my life shifted beneath me. Chapter 3, 5 weeks. 10 weeks after the miscarriage, I went back to the townhouse for the last box of winter clothes. I chose a Thursday afternoon because Ethan was scheduled to testify in court. His truck was not in the driveway when I arrived. Inside, the house was colder than I remembered. The thermostat had been set to 62. Ethan forgot to buy groceries, forgot to replace light bulbs, forgot to move the mail from the entry table. Without me, the place had become a waiting room. I was in the bedroom folding sweaters into a duffel bag when the front door opened. "Nora." Ethan appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, expression startled. "I thought you were in court." The hearing ended early. His gaze dropped to the bag. You're taking more things. I need my winter clothes. You could move back. I kept folding. He stood there for a long time before saying, I closed the warehouse case. I heard. Marcus's wife followed local news and had told Lena. 3 arrests. 2 indictments. A press conference where Ethan looked composed and exhausted while the chief praised his leadership. I took next week off, he said. That's good. For us. I stopped folding. He stepped into the room. We can go somewhere. The mountains, maybe. Or stay here. I'll turn my phone off. You can't turn it off. I can. You won't. I'm trying. The frustration in his voice triggered something old in me, the reflex to comfort him when my pain became difficult for him to witness. I hated that the reflex still existed. I know, I said. But I don't know whether trying now changes what happened. His eyes reddened. I think about that night every day. So do I. I heard your voicemail afterward. I had forgotten the voicemail. After our call ended, before the ambulance came, I had called again and reached his inbox. I don't know what to do, Ethan. There's so much blood. Please come home. He sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders bowed. I should have come. Yes. I was responsible for 12 officers and a hostage. I know. I thought if I left, someone might die. I know. He looked up at me. Then tell me what I was supposed to do. The question was not angry. It was desperate. Call someone, I said. Call my mother. Call Lena. Send a patrol officer to the hospital. Ask Marcus to update me. Do anything that says I am not alone just because you cannot physically be there? He stared at the floor. You treated it like a transportation problem, I continued. Ambulance equals solved. You never understood that I was calling my husband, not a dispatcher. His face crumpled for half a second before he controlled it. I'm sorry. For once, there was no explanation attached. I sat beside him, leaving several inches between us. We talked until the room darkened. We talked about the baby, something we had not done even once. We talked about the small knitted hat the hospital had placed in a memory box. We talked about how Ethan had gone back to the station after visiting me because he could not bear to return to an empty house. We talked about how I had moved out because I could not bear to lie in a bed where I had spent 3 years waiting for headlights in the driveway. At some point, I began crying. Ethan did not try to fix it. He sat beside me and cried too. One conversation did not heal us. It made us vulnerable, and vulnerability is not always wise. That night, we slept together. There was no dramatic reconciliation. No promises. No certainty. Just grief, familiarity, and 2 people reaching for the version of themselves that existed before the worst night of their marriage. In the morning, shame arrived with the sunlight. Ethan made coffee. I packed the remaining sweaters. Stay, he said. I can't. Will I see you again? We're still married. That isn't what I asked. I zipped the bag. I don't know. 5 weeks later, the employee health office called to say my routine post-loss lab work had an unexpected result. I went downstairs during my lunch break, expecting anemia or a thyroid abnormality. The physician looked at the screen, then at me. You're pregnant. For several seconds, I heard nothing but the hum of the ventilation system. That can't be right. The test was repeated. Your levels suggest roughly 5 weeks. The townhouse. The darkened bedroom. Ethan's hand shaking against my back. My entire body went cold. Because the interval after a second trimester loss was short, the physician referred me to maternal fetal medicine. The specialist explained risks without dramatizing them: anemia, cervical changes, emotional trauma, the need for close monitoring. You do not have to make a decision today, she said. But whatever you choose, it should be your decision, not a reaction to grief, guilt, or pressure from anyone else. I carried the ultrasound referral home in my purse and hid it in the back of a desk drawer. For a week, I told no one. Every night, I placed my hand on my abdomen and felt nothing. I asked questions the silence could not answer. Could I raise a child alone? Would keeping the pregnancy chain me to a marriage that had already broken? Would ending it feel like losing the same child twice? The uncertainty exhausted me. I slept poorly and worked too much because controlled environments felt safer than my apartment. During an overnight shift, I was reviewing a cross-match discrepancy when the room tilted. I grabbed the counter. A coworker said my name. Then the floor rose toward me. I woke in the emergency department with saline running into my arm. A nurse stood at the computer. Your blood sugar dropped and you're dehydrated. We need an emergency contact. I looked at the blank line on the form. Call Lena Ortiz. Spouse? I thought of Ethan's number, deleted from my emergency profile. No. The nurse glanced at my wedding ring, which I still wore on a chain around my neck. No spouse? I answered quietly. No family. I did not know that Lena would call Marcus for help getting my car home. I did not know Marcus would tell Ethan exactly what I had said. I only knew that, for the first time, the hospital record matched how my marriage felt. The nurse returned later with a clipboard and a quieter question. Do you feel safe at home? Yes. Is anyone controlling your medical care, money, transportation, or decisions about the pregnancy? No. The questions were standard, but they forced distinctions I had avoided. Ethan had never threatened me. He had never controlled my body or my bank account. Emotional abandonment did not fit neatly into the boxes on the form. A marriage could be free of abuse and still become unlivable. I signed a temporary healthcare proxy naming Lena. I authorized the hospital to share information with her and no one else. The decision felt harsher than changing a contact name in my phone. Medical authority was trust translated into law. When Lena arrived, she read the form and looked at me carefully. Are you sure? No, I said. But I am sure I do not want a doctor searching for Ethan while I am unconscious. She signed as witness. Later, after Ethan learned about the pregnancy, he would ask why I had removed him without warning. I would tell him the warning had lasted years. It had been every unanswered call, every empty dinner plate, every promise offered after the emergency instead of before it. Chapter 4: No Family. Ethan reached the emergency department before Lena did. He entered still wearing his shoulder holster beneath an open jacket, breath uneven as though he had run from the parking garage. The moment he saw me, he stopped. I had never seen fear on Ethan's face at a crime scene, in a courtroom, or during the night a drunk driver pointed a gun at him during a traffic stop. His fear was usually compressed into action. Now there was nowhere for it to go. What happened? Low blood sugar. Why didn't you call me? I looked at the four-tubing. Why would I? His jaw tightened. Because I'm your husband. You weren't listed. I know. So Marcus had told him everything. The nurse returned with discharge instructions. Ms. Hayes needs someone to stay with her tonight. She also needs to follow up with maternal fetal medicine. The pregnancy is still early, but given her recent history? Ethan turned toward me so sharply the nurse stopped speaking. Pregnancy? I closed my eyes. This was not how I had planned to tell him, assuming I ever planned to tell him at all. The nurse looked between us, understood she had stepped into something private, and left the paperwork on the counter. Ethan's voice dropped. You're pregnant? 5 weeks. His lips parted. No sound came out. I haven't decided what I'm doing, I said. His face changed, not anger exactly, but shock edged with panic. We need to talk. I know. Tonight. I'm tired. Nora, this is our child. The last one was our child too. The words landed between us. Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed. For several seconds, he looked unable to breathe. I know, he said finally. Lena arrived carrying my coat. She stopped when she saw Ethan. You came. He did not react to the accusation hidden inside the observation. I'm taking her home. To which home? Lena asked. I almost laughed. Ethan looked at me. My apartment, I said. Lena can stay. I can stay. No. Nora. I said no. He stood, but he did not argue. That restraint was new. At the apartment, Lena made soup, forced me to eat crackers, and demanded the full story. When I told her about the pregnancy, she cried first, then apologized for crying, then cried harder. What do you want? She asked. I don't know. That is allowed. I'm afraid if I keep the baby, everyone will assume I'm choosing Ethan. You can choose a child without choosing a man. I'm afraid if I don't keep it, I'll be making the decision because he failed me. Then take time until the decision belongs to you. The next morning, Ethan sent breakfast from a cafe near my building. At noon, groceries arrived. At 3, he transferred $10,000 into our joint account with a note, medical expenses and whatever you need. I transferred it back. Money had never been the problem. Over the next week, he texted every morning and evening. Did you eat? How are you feeling? Do you need a ride to the doctor? I answered politely. Yes. Fine. No, thank you. The formality unsettled him more than silence. He began appearing outside the hospital after my shifts. Sometimes he brought food. Sometimes fruit. Once he brought a heating pad and 3 different pregnancy pillows because an online review had said they helped with back pain. I accepted some things and refused others. One evening, he stood beside his truck holding a stainless steel lunch container. I made dinner. You made it? I followed a recipe. Inside was chicken soup, steamed vegetables, and rice. The carrots were unevenly cut. The rice was slightly overcooked. Thank you, I said. The words made him flinch. Married people did not thank each other like coworkers exchanging documents. We did now. Nora. I waited. I heard what you told the nurse. I looked at him. No family. His voice cracked around the phrase. Is that what I made you feel? I could have softened the truth. I had softened it for years. Yes. He looked away toward the hospital entrance, where families came and went beneath bright automatic doors. I thought providing was enough, he said. I thought being faithful and paying the mortgage and doing dangerous work for the right reasons made me a good husband. You were faithful to the department. He absorbed that without protest. I don't know how to fix this. I don't either. Can I try? You can change whatever you believe needs changing. But you cannot make me promise a result. He nodded slowly. That weekend, he made an appointment with a grief counselor who specialized in first responders and pregnancy loss. He did not ask me to attend. He simply sent a message after the session. I said the baby's name out loud today. We had never officially chosen a name, but in private we had called the baby Rowan. I read the message until the letters blurred. For the first time since the hospital, I answered with more than one sentence. I'm glad someone said it. Ethan's first counseling session lasted 90 minutes. I knew because he sat in his truck outside my building afterward until the parking lights came on. He did not ask to come upstairs. He sent a photograph of a worksheet titled Roles I Use to Avoid Vulnerability. Under profession, he had written, command, competence, urgency, moral certainty. Under marriage, he had written, provider, protector, absent witness. The phrase stayed with me. An absent witness. He had seen my life in summaries, lab schedules, grocery lists, appointment reminders, photographs I sent when he missed birthdays. He had loved the evidence of me without witnessing the living person. His attempts at repair also exposed how little he knew about my daily life. He sent prenatal vitamins containing an ingredient that made me nauseated. He ordered food from a restaurant I had stopped liking 2 years earlier. He waited outside the wrong hospital entrance after my shift because he did not know the laboratory staff used a separate exit. Each mistake embarrassed him. I refused to soothe the embarrassment. Ask, I told him. Do not investigate me. So he began asking. What food can you tolerate? Which entrance? What time is your next appointment? Do you want company, transportation, or neither? The questions were small. Their absence had helped destroy us. Their return became the first skill he practiced consistently. Chapter 5, The Decision. I kept the pregnancy. The decision came without ceremony. No dramatic revelation, no sign from the universe. I was sitting in the maternal fetal medicine waiting room beneath a television showing a home renovation program with the sound turned off. A woman across from me held an ultrasound envelope against her chest. Her husband rested a palm on her knee. When the nurse called my name, I stood and realized I had already decided. The ultrasound room was dim. The technician warned me that it might be too early to see much. A few minutes later, a rapid flicker appeared on the screen. There, she said. That's cardiac activity. I began to cry. It was not joy exactly. It was grief opening a door and finding hope standing on the other side. After the appointment, I sat in my car for nearly half an hour before texting Ethan. I'm continuing the pregnancy. His call came 3 seconds later. Okay. His voice was steady but strained. I'm not moving home, I said. Okay. This does not mean we are reconciled. I understand. You can attend appointments if I invite you. Thank you. And I need a written plan for emergencies. Not promises. Names, phone numbers, who can leave work, who has keys, who is authorized to speak to doctors. I'll make one today. He did. By evening, Ethan had sent a 3-page document. It listed Lena, my mother, Marcus, Marcus's wife, and a departmental family liaison. It included the number of his commanding officer, the address of my hospital, copies of insurance information, and a statement authorizing the department to release him from duty in a family medical emergency unless an active threat made departure impossible. At the bottom, he had written, "This is not a substitute for me being there. It is what should have existed before." I printed the plan and placed it in my desk drawer beside the ultrasound photograph. At 12 weeks, I invited him to an appointment. He arrived 40 minutes early wearing a navy sweater instead of a suit. He had a notebook in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. You don't need to take notes, I said. I forget things when I'm nervous. You interrogate murder suspects for a living. They are not 6 centimeters long. The doctor reviewed my history, checked the baby's measurements, and explained that the pregnancy appeared healthy. Ethan asked about warning signs, nutrition, exercise, stress, travel, and the likelihood of another loss. The doctor answered patiently, then looked at him over her glasses. Lieutenant, your wife needs support, not surveillance. There is a difference. Ethan closed the notebook. Yes, ma'am. In the parking garage, he handed me the ultrasound printout. You keep it, I said. His eyes lifted to mine. Are you sure? There are copies. He held the photograph by the edges as though it were evidence that could be destroyed by careless handling. That afternoon, his mother came to my apartment. Carol Hayes had raised Ethan alone after his father died in a construction accident. She admired strength, distrusted complaint, and believed sacrifice was the highest form of love, especially when performed by women. She examined my small apartment with visible disapproval. "Ethan says you're pregnant." "Yes." "And you're still living here." "Yes." "This is his child." "I'm aware." "You need to come home." I hung my coat and faced her. "I need to feel safe. Ethan has spent his life keeping people safe. Not me." Her expression hardened. "That's unfair." I told her about the night of the loss. Not the edited family version. Nora had complications, Ethan was trapped at work, but the truth. The bathroom floor. The ambulance. The consent forms. The hours alone. The small memory box a nurse placed in my arms. Carol's face changed. "He told me you had started bleeding and the doctors couldn't stop it." "That is true." He left out the rest. He was working. "I know. You knew what his career demanded when you married him." "I knew it could demand his nights. I did not agree that it could erase his responsibilities as a husband." She looked toward the window. "The miscarriage was not his fault." "I never said it was." The distinction mattered. I would not weaponize a medical tragedy. Ethan had not caused the placental abruption. He had caused the loneliness around it. He was not responsible for the baby dying, I said. He was responsible for acting as though calling an ambulance completed his role. Carol's mouth tightened. I opened the door. "You should go. Nora, this family has already lost one child." "So have I." She stopped. For the first time, she seemed to understand that she had been speaking about a Hayes baby as though the woman who carried that baby were merely the container. She left without another argument. That evening, Ethan called. "My mother came to see you." "Yes." I told her not to. She came anyway. "I'm sorry." "She thinks I am punishing you." "Are you?" I considered the question. "No. Punishment would require me to organize my life around making you suffer. I'm organizing it around staying healthy." He was quiet for a long moment. "That is a painful answer," he said. "It is also the truth." I told her she is not to contact you about the pregnancy again unless you invite her. This surprised me. Ethan had rarely challenged Carol. Their relationship was built on mutual loyalty and mutual avoidance of difficult conversations. "She won't like that." "She doesn't have to." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Thank you." It was the first time gratitude did not sound like a goodbye. I also met with a family law attorney before telling anyone I intended to continue the pregnancy. Rachel Kim explained that remaining married did not require me to combine finances, return home, or give Ethan unrestricted access to medical information. She reviewed Colorado custody law, temporary support, and the practical consequences of separating before the birth. "I am not telling you to divorce," she said. "I am making sure uncertainty does not leave you without options." I paid the consultation fee from my personal account. The receipt felt like another kind of prenatal document, a record that I was preparing not only for a baby, but for my own agency. When I mentioned the meeting during counseling, Ethan went pale. "You spoke to a divorce attorney?" "Yes." "Are you filing?" "I am learning." His first instinct was panic. He took a breath before allowing it to become pressure. "Do you need financial records from me?" he asked. "Yes." He provided them within 2 days: pay statements, retirement accounts, mortgage records, insurance policies, and debt. There were no hidden accounts, no secret spending, no affair concealed in credit card statements. The damage between us was not a mystery waiting to be solved. It was visible in the calendar. That knowledge hurt in a different way. There was no villain to expose, only a husband who had repeatedly chosen absence and a wife who had repeatedly called it understanding. Chapter 6: Proof of Change. Ethan's transformation did not happen in one grand gesture. It happened in boring, inconvenient choices. He stopped volunteering for every overnight command rotation. He trained 2 detectives to cover warrant briefings without him. He created a rotating on-call schedule instead of treating himself as the only competent person in the unit. When his captain accused him of losing his edge, Ethan answered that leadership meant building a team capable of functioning in his absence. The first time a major case broke during one of my appointments, his phone vibrated on the chair between us. He glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. "You can answer," I said. "Marcus has command." "What if he needs you?" "He will call twice." The phone did not ring again. Ethan remained beside me while the doctor explained the results of a cervical length scan. The baby was healthy. I was healthy. The world did not collapse because he stayed. Still, I did not trust the change. Trauma teaches the body to wait for repetition. Every meal he delivered, every appointment he attended, every night he sat outside my building felt temporary. I expected the old Ethan to return the moment a case became interesting enough. Lena noticed my vigilance. "You're watching him like a lab sample," she said over lunch. "I work in a lab." "You know what I mean. You are waiting for contamination. I'm waiting for a pattern." "Fair." She stirred her coffee. "But if the pattern changes, you have to let yourself see that too." I hated when Lena was reasonable. At 16 weeks, Ethan asked whether I would attend one counseling session with him. "No pressure," he said. "The therapist thinks we should talk about expectations before the baby comes, even if we divorce." The practical framing persuaded me. Dr. Helen Brooks's office contained 2 soft chairs, 1 couch, and a box of tissues placed where no one could pretend not to see it. Ethan sat upright as though being interviewed by Internal Affairs. Dr. Brooks asked why we were there. Ethan answered first. "My wife had a pregnancy loss while I was working. I did not go to the hospital until morning. Then I left again. She moved out. Now she is pregnant, and I want to rebuild trust." Dr. Brooks turned to me. "What do you want?" To make decisions without being pressured by his panic. Ethan's face tightened, but he nodded. "And do you want the marriage?" "I don't know." The room remained still. Dr. Brooks did not rescue him from the answer. "Then uncertainty is part of the work." Over the next hour, she asked us to describe the marriage before the loss. Ethan spoke of long hours, dangerous cases, a belief that I understood. I spoke of dinners kept warm until midnight, medical appointments attended alone, holidays interrupted by calls, and the gradual disappearance of my own expectations. "I stopped asking him to come home," I said. He interpreted that as acceptance. Ethan stared at his hands. "What did it mean?" Dr. Brooks asked. "That I had stopped believing he would." He cried without sound. After the session, we stood beside our cars in a cold rain. "I did not know you had given up that early," he said. "I didn't either." "Can I ask something?" I waited. "When you say I became an outsider, was there a specific moment?" "Yes." "The miscarriage?" "No." "The morning after, when your phone rang and you left." He closed his eyes. It would have been easier for him if one impossible emergency had destroyed us. The truth was worse, the destruction occurred in the choice that followed. We continued counseling every other week. Ethan learned to apologize without requesting reassurance. I learned to state needs before resentment converted them into silence. We created practical agreements for the pregnancy and for co-parenting if we separated permanently. He did not ask me to move home. That restraint became its own form of proof. At 20 weeks, the anatomy scan showed a healthy baby girl. Ethan stared at the screen, visibly stunned. "A girl," he whispered. I laughed despite myself. "That is what the doctor said." He pressed a fist against his mouth. The technician looked amused. First daughter? First child, he said, then corrected himself. Second pregnancy. First living child, we hope. The precision of the answer moved me. He had not erased Rowan to make the room more comfortable. Afterward, we sat in the hospital cafe. I want to name her June, I said. Ethan smiled. Your grandmother. She was the strongest person I knew. June Hayes. I looked at him. Maybe. His smile disappeared, but he did not challenge me. The baby's last name had become a symbol neither of us could ignore. If I divorced Ethan before the birth, I might choose Bennett, my maiden name. If we remained married, Hayes would be expected but not required. I understand, he said. Do you? No. But I am trying not to treat my discomfort as a command. That sentence sounded like something from therapy. I appreciated it anyway. Dr. Brooks gave us homework: create 2 calendars. The first showed how we had actually spent the year before the loss. Ethan's shifts, court appearances, call-outs, and overnight cases filled the page in dark blocks. My work schedule appeared in smaller squares around them. Dinners, appointments, and family commitments were written in pencil because they had been the easiest things to erase. The second calendar showed the life we claimed to want. Shared meals. Protected medical appointments. Individual therapy. Time for Lena, our mothers, exercise, and rest. Backup coverage for Ethan. Childcare after June's birth. You cannot build the second calendar by hoping the first one becomes less busy, Dr. Brooks said. Something must be declined, delegated, or removed. Ethan spent a week negotiating changes with his captain. I reduced voluntary overtime at the laboratory. Both choices cost us something: money, prestige, the comfort of being indispensable. We placed the new calendar on the refrigerator after I moved home. It was not romantic, but it was visible. When work intruded, we had to acknowledge what it displaced. When family time was protected, we could no longer pretend it happened accidentally. One Friday, Ethan declined a networking dinner because we had counseling. His captain called the decision domestic diplomacy. Ethan answered, "No, sir. It is an appointment." He told me about the exchange without expecting praise. That was when I began to believe the changes might belong to him rather than to his fear of losing me. Chapter 7: Boundaries. At 22 weeks, I met Dr. Claire Monroe outside a neighborhood grocery store. Claire was the Denver Police Department's trauma psychologist and Ethan's former girlfriend. They had dated for 2 years in the academy and remained professionally close. I had never believed Ethan was sleeping with her. Emotional boundaries were another matter. She recognized me near the automatic doors. Nora. It's been a while. Hello, Claire. Her eyes dropped briefly to my abdomen. Congratulations. Thank you. I heard you and Ethan were living separately. The speed of departmental gossip never impressed me. We are. He has been struggling. That is his information to share. Claire adjusted the strap of her bag. I'm not trying to interfere. I'm concerned about him. He has stepped back from several cases, and people are questioning whether he's compromised. Has he made unsafe decisions? No. Failed his team? No. Then perhaps they are uncomfortable because he is no longer sacrificing everything outside the department. Her expression cooled. Police work is not a normal job. I know. I was married to it. She sighed. Ethan cares about you. He always has. He simply expresses it differently. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Claire, are you explaining my husband to me as his psychologist or as his former girlfriend? Color rose in her face. That is unfair. It is a boundary. I have never crossed a line with Ethan. I did not accuse you of an affair. I am telling you that discussing his marriage with me in a parking lot is not appropriate. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she nodded. You're right. I walked away shaking, not from fear but from the unfamiliar effort of defending my place without begging anyone to recognize it. That night, Ethan texted. Claire said she ran into you. I'm sorry she discussed us. I replied, did you discuss us with her? He called instead of texting. She was my department-appointed clinician after the warehouse operation, he said. I told her about the loss in a professional session. I did not authorize her to speak with you. Did you tell her we were separated? Yes. Did you talk about wanting me back? Yes. Then she is not the right therapist for you. He was quiet. I continued, even if she is ethical, the history makes it impossible for me to trust the arrangement. You need an independent clinician. You're right. The immediate agreement surprised me. I'll request someone outside the department. You don't have to do it because I'm jealous. I'm doing it because you identified a conflict I should have identified myself. The next week, he transferred care to a private therapist specializing in law enforcement trauma. Claire sent a short email apologizing for overstepping. I accepted the apology and did not invite further conversation. The incident taught me something important. Repairing a marriage was not only about whether Ethan came home. It was about whether I could speak before disappearing inside myself. At 24 weeks, my lease came up for renewal. The apartment was becoming difficult. The bathroom had no tub. The stairs left me breathless. The old radiator overheated unpredictably, and the nearest parking space was half a block away. Lena suggested I move into her larger home. My mother suggested I move in with her. Ethan said nothing until I asked. Do you want me to come back? Yes. The honesty hung between us. But I don't want you to come back because the apartment is inconvenient, he added. If you return, I want it to be on terms that make you safer, not easier for me. What terms? Separate bedrooms as long as you want. Your own account. Your own keys. No expectation that you cook, clean, or manage my life. Weekly counseling. The emergency plan stays in place. If I break an agreement, you leave without debate. You have thought about this. Every night. I toured 2 other apartments before deciding. In the end, I moved back to the townhouse. Not because the marriage was healed. Because the home had space, because Ethan had converted the guest room into a room for me rather than a nursery, and because I wanted to know whether change could survive proximity. On moving day, he had replaced the gray curtains in the living room with the yellow ones from my apartment. You hated these, I said. I said they were bright. You said they looked like a school bus. I was wrong about school buses. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound startled us both. Ethan smiled slowly, as though he had been given something fragile. That night, he cooked chicken, rice, and vegetables. The chicken was dry, the vegetables too soft, and the rice nearly perfect. How is it? He asked. Better. Better than last time or actually good? Let's not get ambitious. He grinned. We ate at the same table without phones. The silence between us no longer felt empty. It felt unfinished. Moving back required a financial reset as well as a physical one. We divided household expenses according to income, kept personal accounts, and opened a shared account used only for the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and future childcare. Ethan removed me from the role of unpaid household accountant by setting automatic payments and learning every password himself. The first monthly budget meeting was painfully awkward. We have never done this, he said. I have done it every month. You have never attended. He nodded, accepting the correction. We reviewed insurance deductibles, maternity leave, infant care, and the cost of replacing my income if I reduced hours. Ethan initially suggested covering everything from his salary. I do not want an allowance, I said. That is not what I meant. I know. But intention does not prevent a power imbalance. We settled on proportional contributions and equal access to shared records. The post-loss savings account remained mine alone. The arrangement made Ethan uncomfortable, but discomfort was no longer treated as evidence that a boundary was wrong. That same week, he gave me a new key to the townhouse. The old one still worked. What is this for? Acknowledgement, he said. You are not returning as the person who left. I added the key to my ring. It looked identical to the old one. Its meaning was not. Chapter 8, The Call He Did Not Take. The test came on a Tuesday night. I was 28 weeks pregnant. Ethan had been home for dinner 4 nights in a row, a record so ordinary it felt miraculous. We were discussing paint colors for the nursery when his department phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Marcus. Answer it, I said. He did. A child had been abducted from a gas station. Patrol had located the suspected vehicle near the interstate. The homicide unit was assisting because the suspect was tied to an unsolved murder. Ethan stood immediately. I felt my body close. He saw it. Nora. I'm fine. You're not. A child is missing. Go. He crouched in front of my chair. I am going. But first, we follow the plan. He called Lena and confirmed she could come. He texted Marcus that he would arrive in 40 minutes, not 20. He placed the emergency folder on the kitchen counter, checked that my phone was charged, and told me the command center address and expected duration. This may go all night, he said. I know. I will call at midnight unless we are actively moving. You don't need permission. I am not asking permission. I am giving you information. The distinction mattered. He kissed my forehead, waited until Lena's car pulled into the driveway, and left. At midnight, he called. The child had been found alive. The suspect was barricaded inside a motel room. I may not be home until morning, he said. Okay. How are you? Tired. June is kicking. Can I hear? That is not how fetal movement works. I know. I panicked. I laughed softly. At 3 a.m, I woke with a tightening across my abdomen. It passed, then returned 10 minutes later. Lena sat up on the couch immediately. Contractions? I don't know. We called the obstetric triage line. They instructed us to come in. My hand hovered over Ethan's name. The motel standoff was still active. A child was safe, but officers were exposed. I called anyway. He answered on the first ring. I'm having contractions. Where are you? Home. Lena is here. We're going to St. Catherine. I'm coming. What about the standoff? Marcus has command. The tactical captain is on scene. Ethan, if it is unsafe. I have transferred command. I'm coming. He arrived at the hospital 12 minutes after we did. The contractions were caused by dehydration and uterine irritability, not preterm labor. The baby's heart rate remained strong. After fluids and monitoring, the doctor expected to discharge me by morning. Ethan sat beside the bed, still wearing his tactical vest beneath an open jacket. His hands trembled. You left, I said. Yes. Was anyone endangered? No. Marcus was already acting commander. I was useful, not essential. The phrase seemed difficult for him. I spent years believing those were the same thing, he admitted. His phone rang. He looked at the screen but did not move. Answer, I said. It's the chief. Definitely answer. He stepped into the hallway. Through the glass, I watched him explain. His posture remained respectful, but he did not apologize for leaving. When he returned, he looked almost surprised. The chief said Marcus handled it well. Imagine that. He also said I should have built redundancy years ago. Your chief and my therapist would get along. Ethan sat down. The suspect surrendered. Good. He looked at the monitor tracing June's heartbeat. I came because you called, he said. I know. That should not feel like an accomplishment. No. But it does. For now. His eyes met mine. For the first time, I reached for his hand. He closed his fingers around mine carefully, as though sudden movement might frighten me away. The gesture did not erase the empty hospital chair from months earlier. It placed another memory beside it. That was how trust returned, not as forgiveness descending all at once, but as new evidence filed against the old. The hospital kept me for observation until late morning. Ethan remained even after the chief requested a written explanation for transferring command. He drafted it in the chair beside my bed, showed it to me only when I asked, and accepted responsibility without presenting my pregnancy as an excuse. I transferred command to the designated alternate when a documented family medical emergency arose. Operational continuity was maintained. There was no heroic language. No accusation that the department had forced him to choose. He had chosen, and he owned the professional consequences. Marcus visited after his shift, carrying terrible coffee and a grin. The motel team survived without you, he told Ethan. I heard. We even arrested the suspect. Miraculous. Marcus's humor faded when he looked at me. I should have stepped up sooner. We all let him believe no one else could run the unit. That was not your responsibility, I said. Maybe not. Still true. The department had rewarded Ethan's permanent availability because everyone benefited from it, until the personal cost became public enough to examine. Systems and individuals had reinforced each other. On the drive home, I asked whether he regretted leaving the scene. No, he said. Then, after a pause, I regret that coming to the hospital felt like disloyalty to the job. That means I let the job become something unhealthy. June kicked beneath my hand. Ethan pulled the car over safely so he could feel it. We sat beside a snowbank laughing while our daughter moved between us. Before discharge, the obstetrician asked Ethan to step out so she could speak with me privately. She asked whether I felt pressured to remain in the marriage because of the pregnancy. I told her no. She asked whether I trusted him to follow the emergency plan. I trust the plan, I said. I am learning whether I trust the person. When Ethan returned, I told him exactly what she had asked. Good, he said. You are not offended? I am relieved someone is checking. I was your legal next of kin while behaving like an unavailable coworker. A title should not prevent questions. The answer stayed with me on the way home. Months earlier, he would have heard suspicion and defended his character. Now he heard a safeguard and accepted its purpose. Chapter 9: What Home Requires. Moving back did not restore the old marriage. It exposed how much invisible labor had been holding it together. On the first morning, Ethan woke at 5:30, started coffee, packed his lunch, and left the kitchen looking as though a small tornado had studied police procedure. Grounds covered the counter. A cabinet door remained open. The bread knife lay beside a smear of mustard. Before, I would have cleaned everything without thinking. Instead, I left it. When he came home that evening, he noticed. I made a mess. Yes. I'll clean it. Yes. He did. That became our new language. I stopped anticipating his needs. He learned to notice them himself. He washed his own clothes, bought groceries from a shared list, scheduled repairs, and replaced the porch light that had been broken for 8 months. None of these things were romantic. That was precisely why they mattered. He had always believed marriage was supported by large structures, mortgages, insurance, fidelity, protection. He had not noticed the 1,000 tiny tasks I performed so those structures did not collapse under dust, hunger, and neglect. One Saturday, he found me standing in the laundry room staring at an empty detergent bottle. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "You look angry." I wrote detergent on the list. His eyes flicked toward the refrigerator. "I forgot." "I know. I'll go now." "It is not about the detergent." He leaned against the doorframe, waiting. "It is about having to remember that you forgot. It is about being the person who notices what the house needs, what the baby needs, what you need, and then assigning all of it. If I have to manage you, the work is still mine." He did not defend himself. That afternoon, he created his own recurring list: laundry supplies, prenatal vitamins, dog food for Lena's dog when we watched him, furnace filters, grocery staples. The effort was imperfect, but it was his. Carol visited at my invitation when I was 30 weeks pregnant. She arrived carrying a casserole and a knitted blanket. For several minutes, she sat stiffly on the couch while Ethan made tea. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. I waited. "I made Ethan's work sacred and your pain ordinary." The sentence sounded practiced, but not insincere. I told myself that strong women handle things. I handled things after his father died. I worked 2 jobs. I did not ask anyone for help. She looked down at her hands. I thought that made me strong. Maybe it only made me lonely. Ethan stood motionless in the kitchen. Carol continued. "When you lost the baby, I asked what happened to the Hayes grandchild before I asked what happened to you. I am ashamed of that." The apology did not erase her words in my apartment. It opened a door. "Thank you," I said. She handed me the blanket. It was pale green, with a row of small trees along one edge. "I made 2, she said. "The first is in a box for Rowan, if you want it." My throat closed. Ethan turned away, wiping his face with the heel of his hand. We placed the first blanket in the memory box with the hospital bracelet, the knitted hat, and the photograph of Rowan's tiny handprint. Later, Carol asked before touching my stomach. When June kicked beneath her palm, she laughed and cried at the same time. Boundaries did not destroy family. They taught family how to enter without breaking the door. At 32 weeks, I reduced my hours at the laboratory. The decision was medically sensible and emotionally difficult. Work had become my proof that I could stand alone. Stepping back felt dangerous. Ethan understood without pretending it was simple. "You are not becoming dependent because you work fewer hours," he said. "I know. You don't sound like you know. I spent months building a life that did not require you. And now you are afraid accepting help means losing it." Therapy had made him annoyingly perceptive. "Yes." He sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Then keep the apartment fund." I frowned. "What apartment fund?" "The money you saved for rent. Keep it separate. Add to it if you want. I will not ask what it is for." "You are comfortable with your wife maintaining an exit fund?" "No," he smiled without humor. "I am terrified of it. But safety that depends on you having no way to leave is not safety." I looked at him for a long time. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone paying a lot of money to a very good therapist." I laughed. That night, we sat on the nursery floor assembling a crib. Ethan installed one rail backward, swore, removed it, and started again. I folded tiny clothes into drawers. The yellow curtains from my apartment hung over the window. "Do you think we can do this?" he asked. "Raise a baby? Be a family." I placed a stack of sleepers in the drawer. "I think we are learning what the word means." It was not a promise. It was more honest than one. We eventually divided the house into responsibilities rather than help. Ethan owned groceries, kitchen cleanup, vehicle maintenance, and household repairs. I owned medical scheduling, linens, and the nursery inventory. We alternated meal planning and hired a cleaner twice a month when the pregnancy made physical work difficult. Hiring help triggered an argument with both mothers, who viewed paid cleaning as wasteful. Carol said, "A house this size should not be difficult to keep up." Ethan answered, "Then you are welcome to clean it, but Nora is not required to." My mother laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. The conversation mattered because Ethan did not frame the cleaner as a favor to a pregnant wife. He framed domestic labor as real labor that required time, energy, or money. We also established a weekly meeting with 3 questions: what worked? What felt lonely? What needs to change? Some weeks the answers were trivial. He left wet towels on the floor. I scheduled an appointment without adding it to the calendar. Other weeks, I admitted I had spent an entire evening waiting for him to revert to the man he had been. He admitted he sometimes resented the carefulness required around me, then hated himself for the resentment. Naming those feelings prevented them from becoming secret evidence against each other. Home did not become peaceful because conflict disappeared. It became safer because conflict no longer threatened abandonment. Chapter 10: The Man Without the Badge. Ethan's greatest crisis did not come from a murder investigation. It came from being ordinary. At 33 weeks, the department opened a formal review of staffing practices in his unit. No one accused him of misconduct. The review examined excessive overtime, poor delegation, burnout, and a culture in which supervisors were rewarded for being permanently available. The chief temporarily reassigned Ethan to daytime administrative duties while the review proceeded. He came home at 5:15 on the first day and stood in the entryway looking displaced. "You're early," I said. "I know." "What happened?" "Nothing." That is the problem. He had spent the day reviewing training policies, approving leave requests, and attending a budget meeting. No sirens. No blood. No urgent call demanding the clearest part of him. At dinner, he barely spoke. By the 3rd day, he was irritable. He cleaned the garage at midnight. He checked departmental email every 6 minutes. When Marcus called about an active case, Ethan asked so many questions that Marcus finally said, "Lieutenant, either trust me or come take the case back." Ethan ended the call and threw his phone onto the couch. "You want to go," I said. "Yes." "Then go." He looked at me sharply. "I'm not testing you. If you need to work, work. But decide whether you are needed or whether you need to feel needed." His expression hardened. That sounds simple when you are not responsible for people's lives. The words struck like a slap. I stood. "You are right. I only work in a medical laboratory where inaccurate results can kill patients. I would not understand responsibility." "Nora, that is not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant. You are frustrated, so you reached for the old hierarchy. Your work is real. Mine is background. Your stress excuses cruelty. Mine should remain convenient." He rose from the couch. "I'm sorry. I do not want an apology delivered fast enough to stop the consequences." I went to the guest room and locked the door. The next morning, Ethan was gone before I woke. A note sat beside the kettle. I was cruel because I felt useless. "That is mine to examine, not yours to absorb. I will be at therapy after work. I will stay at a hotel tonight unless you tell me otherwise." I did not tell him otherwise. For 2 nights, he stayed away. Not as punishment and not because a case called him. He gave me space because I asked for it. During his 2nd night at the hotel, I had dinner with Lena. "He messed up," she said. A familiar flavor of messed up. "Yes. But he did not turn the mistake into your job." "No." "Do you miss him?" I stared at my soup. "Yes. The admission frightened me. Missing the old Ethan had been dangerous because it encouraged me to accept crumbs. Missing the man he was becoming felt different. It did not erase caution, but it revealed attachment still alive beneath it. I called him. He answered immediately. Are you okay? Yes. Come home tomorrow. Okay. We need to discuss what happened. I know. And I need you to understand that changing jobs for me will not fix anything if you resent me for it. I am not changing jobs for you. You applied for the administrative rotation after the hospital. I applied because the hospital showed me what my choices had cost. That is different. The next evening, we returned to Dr. Brooks's office. Ethan spoke openly about his father's death, about being 13 and watching Carol survive by never stopping, about joining the police academy because action felt safer than helplessness. He admitted that cases gave him rules: collect evidence, identify danger, protect victims, arrest offenders. Marriage asked him to remain present in pain he could not solve. When Nora lost Rowan, I chose the place where I knew who I was, he said. At the hospital, I was a man whose child had died and whose wife needed something I could not repair. At the scene, I was Lieutenant Hayes. Dr. Brooks asked, "Who are you without the badge?" He looked at me. I don't know yet. That honesty was more useful than confidence. The review ultimately recommended reforms, not punishment. Ethan remained a lieutenant but accepted a 6-month assignment in training and professional standards. He would develop policies on supervisor coverage, trauma leave, and family emergency response. Some officers mocked the assignment as a desk exile. Ethan did not pretend it did not bother him. He also did not retreat from it. One evening, he showed me a draft policy requiring every command officer to maintain a designated alternate and prohibiting retaliation when personnel used family emergency leave. Would this have changed that night? He asked. Maybe. Maybe is enough to write it. He returned to the document. For the first time, the worst night of our lives was becoming something other than a wound. It was becoming a warning that might protect someone else. During the administrative review, Ethan attended a peer support meeting for officers struggling with identity after reassignment, injury, or retirement. He returned quieter than usual. One of the retired detectives said he missed being the person people called when everything went wrong, he told me. His wife said the family had spent 30 years being the people he called when he was finished saving everyone else. The sentence followed him. He began rebuilding relationships outside police work. He met Marcus for breakfast without discussing cases. He joined me on slow walks around the neighborhood. He repaired an old bicycle and discovered he enjoyed woodworking badly enough to fill the garage with uneven shelves. The first shelf he built leaned visibly to the left. It has character, he said. It has a structural emergency. He rebuilt it. Ordinary life frustrated him because progress could not be measured in arrests or solved cases. There was no commendation for remembering milk, no press conference for attending therapy, no medal for staying during a difficult conversation. That became the point. One evening, he received notice that the warehouse homicide prosecution had resulted in guilty verdicts. For years, such a result would have consumed the night, calls, drinks with detectives, reliving each decision. He made 2 calls, congratulated the team, and came back to the nursery to finish installing drawer handles. Do you need to celebrate? I asked. I am celebrating, he said, holding up a tiny brass handle. I installed this one straight. Chapter 11, Rowan's Day. The anniversary of Rowan's due date arrived in early March. Snow had fallen overnight, softening the streets and rooftops. I woke before dawn with grief sitting on my chest so heavily I could barely inhale. Ethan was asleep in the room across the hall. We still kept separate bedrooms. Physical distance made honesty easier. I walked to the nursery and sat in the rocking chair. June shifted inside me. Her heel pressed beneath my ribs. love and grief existed together, either canceling the other. Ethan found me there at 6. He did not ask why I was crying. He sat on the floor beside the chair and rested his head against my knee. "I took the day off," he said. "You didn't need to." "I know." We drove to the foothills after breakfast. Months earlier, the hospital's grief counselor had told us about a memorial garden where families could place stones for children lost during pregnancy or infancy. Ethan carried a flat river stone engraved with one word, Rowan. At the garden, snow clung to bare branches. Hundreds of stones rested beneath a large cottonwood tree, names, dates, initials, messages too private to read. We placed Rowan's stone near the roots. Ethan knelt despite the cold. "I am sorry I was not there," he said quietly. "I am sorry I left your mother afterward. I loved you before I knew how to make room for you in my life." The words were for a child who could not hear them and for the woman standing behind him. I placed a gloved hand on his shoulder. "I was afraid to name you," I whispered. "I thought loving this pregnancy meant replacing you. It doesn't." We stood there until our fingers went numb. That afternoon, Carol joined us at home. She brought the pale green blanket for Rowan's memory box and a second blanket for June. My mother came too, carrying soup and a photo album from my childhood. The gathering was awkward, tender, and necessary. For years, our families had praised Ethan's dedication and my patience. No one had asked whether those qualities were destroying us. Around the kitchen table, we spoke honestly about the ways everyone had reinforced the arrangement. My mother cried when she admitted she had told me to be understanding because she feared divorce more than she feared my loneliness. Carol said she had raised Ethan to believe love was proven by endurance rather than attention. Ethan listened without trying to defend himself. "I used all of you as evidence that Nora was unreasonable," he said. "If our mothers thought she should be patient, then I did not have to ask whether I was failing her." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "I am sorry." I accepted the apology, but I did not tell anyone everything was fine. Healing became less performative when I stopped offering comfort on demand. Later, while the mothers washed dishes together, Ethan and I sat in the living room. "I have something for you," he said. He handed me a folder. Inside were revised legal documents, updated medical power of attorney, beneficiary forms, life insurance, and a post-nuptial agreement drafted by separate counsel. The agreement protected my savings, established support during maternity leave, and clarified that if we separated, neither person would use custody or finances as leverage. "You did this without asking me?" I asked an attorney what documents would reduce your risk. "You can reject all of it. You need your own lawyer." "Why a postnuptial agreement?" "Because saying you are safe is not the same as removing my ability to make you unsafe." I read the provisions twice. Ethan had granted me temporary exclusive use of the townhouse if we separated during the baby's first year. He had placed a portion of his savings into an account for June's medical and childcare expenses. He had agreed to mediation before litigation except in emergencies. The documents did not buy forgiveness. They showed he understood that trust required structure, not emotion alone. "I will have Lena's attorney review it," I said. "Good. Do you expect me to sign?" "I hope you will sign whatever protects you. I do not expect it to make you stay." I closed the folder. "Thank you." This time, the words did not sound like something said to a stranger. That evening, after everyone left, Ethan found me in the hallway holding our wedding photograph. "I was going to put this away," I said. "Do you want me to?" "No." I returned it to the shelf. The people in the picture had loved each other. They had also misunderstood what love required. Both things could be true. I turned toward Ethan. "Stay in my room tonight." His eyes widened. "To sleep," I said. "Nothing else." "Okay." He lay beside me fully clothed above the blanket, leaving space between us. In the dark, I reached across the mattress and took his hand. We slept that way until morning. The Memorial Day also changed the way we spoke about pregnancy loss with others. I had grown tired of phrases meant to close grief quickly. Everything happens for a reason. At least you can get pregnant. Focus on the baby coming now. When a relative used the last phrase at dinner, Ethan answered calmly. June is not a replacement for Rowan. The table went silent. He did not shame the speaker. He explained that we could celebrate one child while mourning another, and that avoiding Rowan's name made the loss lonelier, not smaller. Afterward, I told him I appreciated it. I used to think protecting you meant keeping painful subjects away, he said. Now I think it sometimes means helping carry them into the room. We chose a small annual ritual. On Rowan's due date, we would donate to the hospital's pregnancy loss support fund and spend part of the day outdoors. No mandatory sadness, no performance. A place for whatever arrived. That year, grief softened near sunset. Ethan and I returned to the garden alone. The snow had begun melting around Rowan's stone, revealing dark earth beneath. I used to believe healing meant not hurting when I came here, I said. What do you believe now? That healing means I can hurt and still go home. He took my hand. We went home together. Chapter 12, The Second Siren. June chose to arrive during the worst spring storm Denver had seen in years. I was 36 weeks and 4 days pregnant. The doctor had warned that my blood pressure was climbing and had scheduled additional monitoring. Ethan kept the hospital bag in his truck and another by the front door. At 2 in the afternoon, while I was labeling quality control records at work, a sharp pain crossed my abdomen. Then another. When I stood, warm fluid ran down my legs. My coworker called obstetric triage while I called Ethan. He was teaching a leadership course at the police academy. My water broke, I said. I'm on my way. Roads are bad. I know. Marcus is sending a patrol unit to your building. Do not drive. The old Ethan might have abandoned the class without a word. The man he had become handed command to another instructor, notified his supervisor, activated our plan, and left without creating chaos behind him. A patrol officer transported me to St. Catherine with lights but no siren. Snow thickened against the windshield. Ethan arrived 7 minutes after I entered triage. Labor progressed quickly. June's heart rate remained strong at first, then began dropping during contractions. The obstetrician explained that the baby was not tolerating labor and recommended an emergency cesarean. My vision narrowed. The fluorescent lights became the lights from the night we lost Rowan. The rustle of surgical paper became the sound of the ambulance blanket. I could not breathe. Ethan stepped into my line of sight. Nora. Look at me. I can't do this again. This is not that night. What if she dies? I am here. The words alone would once have been meaningless. Months of evidence gave them weight. He held my hand while I signed consent. He changed into surgical clothing and stayed beside my head as the operating room filled with motion. When the first incision began, his phone vibrated in the bag beneath his chair. He did not look at it. You can answer, I whispered, half delirious. No. What if it is important? You are important. A few minutes later, June entered the world without crying. The room changed instantly. A pediatric team carried her to the warmer. Someone called for respiratory support. I watched Ethan's face instead of the doctor's. Terror moved through him, but he did not leave me to stand closer to the warmer. He remained where he had promised, one hand around mine, his body angled so he could see our daughter. Then a thin, furious cry cut through the room. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. She's crying, he said. I began to sob. June weighed 5 pounds, 11 ounces. She needed oxygen for several minutes but did not require intensive care. A nurse brought her to my chest, wrapped in a striped hospital blanket. Her face was red and furious. Her dark hair lay damp against her head. "Hello," I whispered. Ethan touched one finger to her cheek. His hand shook violently. "You're allowed to cry," I said. "I'm not crying. You are dripping on the baby." He laughed through tears. After surgery, complications developed. My blood pressure remained dangerously high, and I began bleeding more than expected. Nurses moved quickly, administering medication and calling the physician back. Ethan stood aside when asked, but he did not disappear. He called Lena and our mothers. He updated them without minimizing the situation. He asked the nurses what they needed from him. When I became too weak to speak, he read my advance directive from the emergency folder and confirmed my wishes accurately. The bleeding slowed after treatment. My blood pressure stabilized over several hours. Near midnight, I woke in recovery. June slept in a bassinet beside the bed. Ethan sat in the chair, holding her against his chest. His phone lay powered off on the windowsill. "How long have you been there?" I asked. He looked up. "All day." The answer was so simple. All day. Not until the call came. Not until someone more urgent needed him. Not for 23 minutes. All day. He brought June closer. "She has your mouth," he said. "She looks like an angry potato. A beautiful angry potato." I smiled. Ethan's expression softened, then grew serious. "I know today does not erase anything." "No. I know being here is the minimum." "Yes. But I am here." I looked at him, at our daughter, at the chair that was no longer empty. "I know," I said. "The hospital required us to complete the birth certificate before discharge." A clerk placed the form on my tray and pointed to the line for the baby's legal name. June Eleanor ___________. Ethan looked at me but said nothing. For months, I had considered using Bennett. The name represented independence, my mother's family, and the life I had built while separated. Hayes represented a marriage that had failed me and a man who was no longer failing in the same way. "This should not be a test," I said. "It isn't. If I choose Bennett, you are still her father." "I know. If I choose Hayes, it does not mean everything is forgiven." "I know that too." I wrote Hayes. Not as a reward. Not because convention demanded it. Because at that moment, I wanted our daughter's name to reflect the family we were actively building, with all its history visible. Ethan signed the acknowledgement of parentage, then bent over the bassinet. "Hello, June Eleanor Hayes," he whispered. During the 2-night hospital stay, he learned diapering from a nurse, tracked my medications, and slept in the rigid chair without complaint. When a detective called to congratulate him and began discussing a case, Ethan interrupted. "I am on leave. Call Marcus." The boundary was brief, almost mundane. I watched him place the phone face down and return to fastening June's sleeper. The chair beside my bed remained occupied. A lactation consultant visited the next morning and spoke to both of us, not only to me. She showed Ethan how to track feedings and recognize signs of dehydration. A postpartum nurse reviewed warning signs for hemorrhage, infection, blood clots, and mood disorders. Ethan wrote everything down. When the nurse asked who would be with me during the first week home, he answered, "I will, and we have backups." He named Lena, both mothers, my physician, and the departmental family liaison. The system we had built no longer existed only on paper. It surrounded us. I watched the nurse check each item on the discharge plan. Months before, I had left a hospital with Lena because my husband was unavailable. This time, I left with Ethan carrying June and Lena following behind with the bags. No one person carried everything. Chapter 13, After the Applause. No one applauds the part after a baby comes home. There is no music for cracked nipples, medication schedules, laundry at 3 in the morning, or the particular terror of watching a newborn sleep and wondering whether her chest is still moving. June woke every 2 hours. Sometimes every 40 minutes. Ethan took 6 weeks of family leave, the first extended absence he had taken in 14 years with the department. On the third night, he stood in the nursery holding a screaming baby while wearing one slipper and a shirt stained with formula. "What does she want?" he asked. "She is 4 days old. Her list is limited. I fed her. I changed her. I burped her. Maybe she wants to complain about management." June screamed louder. Ethan looked offended. "She gets that from you." I laughed, then winced as the incision pulled. He noticed immediately. "Sit down." "I am sitting." "Sit down more." Sleep deprivation made us ridiculous. It also made us honest. The first serious fight happened when June was 3 weeks old. I woke from a short nap and found the house empty. Ethan's truck was gone. His phone went to voicemail. Panic rose so fast that my hands became numb. He returned 20 minutes later carrying diapers and infant gas drops. "Where were you?" "The pharmacy." "You left without telling me." "You were asleep." "You left." The accusation sounded disproportionate even to me, but my body had already returned to the hospital, the bathroom floor, the empty chair. Ethan set the bag down slowly. "I am sorry. I should have left a note. You promised you would not disappear." "I went 4 blocks. Do not explain distance to me as though abandonment is measured in miles." His face tightened. "That is not fair." "No, it is not. None of this is fair." June began crying in the bassinet. We both looked toward her and then back at each other. For a second, I saw the old pattern waiting, Ethan becoming defensive, me swallowing fear to preserve peace. He took a breath. "I am getting angry because I feel accused of being the man I was," he said. "But you were afraid because I acted like him." I left without communicating. My anger weakened. "And I am reacting to the past," I admitted. "You were buying medicine, not choosing a case over me." "Both things can be true." That sentence became our postpartum survival rule. Both things can be true. He had changed, and I could still be afraid. I loved him, and I had not fully forgiven him. June was healthy, and Rowan was still gone. We were rebuilding, and rebuilding was exhausting. At 6 weeks, I developed postpartum anxiety severe enough that I stopped sleeping even when June slept. I checked the locks repeatedly. I recorded her breathing on my phone. I imagined accidents, fevers, kidnappings, and sudden infant death with the detailed certainty of nightmares. Ethan recognized hypervigilance because he lived with his own version. He did not tell me to calm down. He called Dr. Brooks, drove me to my obstetrician, and sat with June in the waiting room while I discussed medication and therapy. When I was prescribed an antidepressant compatible with breastfeeding, Carol questioned whether it was necessary. Ethan answered before I could. "It is medical treatment. We are not debating it." Carol nodded and changed the subject. 2 months after the birth, the department asked Ethan to return early to help with a high-profile investigation. The request came from the deputy chief and included a clear path back to homicide command. I found the email open on his laptop. "You want it," I said. He did not pretend otherwise. "Part of me does." "What will you do?" I asked for 48 hours. The old Ethan would have accepted before telling me. The new Ethan understood that a major career decision belonged in the marriage. We discussed money, childcare, his identity, my return to work, and the risk that familiar patterns would resume. I did not demand that he refuse. He did not ask me to prove love by supporting him unconditionally. In the end, he declined the command and accepted a permanent role overseeing detective training and wellness standards. The position still carried his rank and allowed occasional field consultation, but nights were rare and predictable. "I am proud of you," I said. He looked uncomfortable. "I don't want a medal for being a father." "You are not getting one. I am proud that you made a decision based on the whole life you have, not the single identity that makes you feel heroic." That, he accepted. When June was 4 months old, I returned to the laboratory 3 days a week. Ethan adjusted his schedule. Lena helped on Wednesdays. Our mothers each took one afternoon, under rules I wrote and everyone respected. The first day back, I cried in the parking garage. Not because I wanted to remain home. Because leaving and returning were both complicated now. At the end of the shift, Ethan waited outside with June strapped to his chest in a carrier. She wore a yellow hat and stared at me with grave suspicion. "How was work?" he asked. The question stopped me. For years, I had asked about his cases, his witnesses, his impossible hours. He had rarely asked about my day beyond whether I was tired enough to skip dinner. "It was good," I said. "The new analyzer failed calibration, and I found the problem before we reported patient results." He listened while I explained. Not politely. Not as penance. He listened because the work mattered to me. On the drive home, June slept in the back seat, and Ethan held my hand across the center console. We were not the family people imagined when they saw the uniform, the wedding ring, and the baby. We were less perfect and more real. Physical intimacy returned more slowly than affection. At my postpartum appointment, the physician cleared me medically, but my body did not experience clearance as desire. I feared pregnancy, pain, and the vulnerability of needing Ethan again. He did not treat the medical date as a deadline. We began with ordinary closeness, sitting shoulder to shoulder, kissing without expectation, sleeping in the same bed on nights when anxiety was quiet. When I pulled away, he stopped. When he felt rejected, he discussed it in therapy rather than turning silence into punishment. Months later, when we finally made love, I cried afterward. Ethan went still. "Did I hurt you?" "No." "Do you regret it?" "No." I cried because tenderness had once felt like something I needed to earn by asking for less. Now it arrived with questions, attention, and room to change my mind. Postpartum recovery also forced me to confront my own tendency to become indispensable. I corrected Ethan's diaper technique, feeding schedule, and baby soothing methods until Dr. Brooks asked whether I wanted a partner or an employee. "He does things wrong," I said. "Wrong or differently?" "Sometimes wrong. Often differently." I learned to leave the room while he parented. Ethan learned without being supervised. June learned that comfort could come from more than one person. The lesson mirrored the one that had transformed his police unit. A family became stronger when no one person guarded every task as proof of worth. Chapter 14, Choosing Again. June was 11 months old when Ethan and I returned to the courthouse. The last time we had been there together, he had testified in a homicide trial while I sat in the hallway holding a cup of coffee he never had time to drink. This time, we met our separate attorneys in a mediation suite to review the post-nuptial agreement and discuss whether to file for divorce. We had postponed the decision during pregnancy and the first postpartum months. Not because the marriage was automatically saved, but because neither of us wanted crisis to choose for us. My attorney, Rachel Kim, had reviewed every document Ethan proposed. She strengthened the financial protections, clarified parenting arrangements, and insisted on independent retirement accounts and a clear process for temporary separation. "You do not have to divorce to prove you have self-respect," she told me. "You also do not have to stay to prove you believe in growth." That was the decision in its cleanest form. Across the table, Ethan looked more nervous than he had on the day of June's birth. The mediator asked whether we wished to proceed with dissolution. I looked at my husband. He did not reach for me. He did not make a speech. He had learned that pressure could hide inside romance. "No," I said. Not today. Ethan's breath left him. I continued before relief became assumption. I want to remain married. I also want the agreement signed. I want counseling to continue. I want annual reviews of childcare and work schedules. I want the right to say this is no longer healthy without being told I failed to forgive. Yes, he said. The mediator smiled slightly. Mr. Hayes, you may wish to let counsel answer some of that. His attorney touched his sleeve. He means the proposed terms are acceptable. We signed the agreement. The moment was not a second wedding. It was better suited to who we had become: fluorescent lights, legal language, coffee in paper cups, and two adults choosing obligations with their eyes open. Outside the courthouse, snowmelt ran along the curb. Ethan stopped near the steps. Can I ask why? Why I stayed? Yes. Because you changed when there was no guarantee I would reward you. His eyes grew bright. And because I changed too, I added. I stopped confusing endurance with love. I stopped expecting you to read needs I refused to speak. I built a life I could leave with, which made staying a choice. He nodded. I love you, he said. I love you too. The words no longer felt like evidence for a case. They were simply true. We did not renew our vows in a ballroom. On our 5th anniversary, we took June to a small cabin near Estes Park. Lena and our mothers joined us for dinner, then left before sunset. After June fell asleep in a travel crib, Ethan and I stood on the porch beneath a sky crowded with stars. He gave me a narrow silver ring engraved on the inside. I am here. I laughed when I read it. Subtle. I considered I finally learned to come home, but the jeweler said it was too long. I slipped the ring onto my right hand. I still wore my original wedding band on the left, not because the original marriage had been untouched, but because it had existed. The new ring did not replace it. It marked a new agreement beside it. I have something for you too, I said. I handed him a laminated card. He read it aloud. Nora Hayes. Emergency contacts: Ethan Hayes, Lena Ortiz, Margaret Bennett. His voice broke on his own name. This is not symbolic, I warned. If you fail to answer, they call Lena. Understood. And there are 3 contacts because no one person should be the entire system. I wrote a policy about that. You did. He pulled me gently against him. For several minutes, we stood without speaking. Below us, June made a small sound through the baby monitor and settled again. Ethan kissed my hair. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Marcus had not told me you said you had no family? Yes. What do you think? I think you would have noticed eventually. That is generous. I did not say I would still have been there. He held me tighter. Our marriage had nearly ended because he believed permanence required no maintenance. It survived because both of us accepted the opposite: love was not proven once. It was practiced in schedules, apologies, boundaries, dishes, doctor visits, and the decision to answer when the phone rang. The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn with June. I listened from bed as he carried her through the cabin, murmuring nonsense about pancakes and mountains. He did not know I was awake. That mattered. Change performed for an audience is persuasion. Change practiced when no one is watching becomes character. I closed my eyes and slept another hour. After signing the agreement, we celebrated with lunch at a diner across from the courthouse. Ethan ordered pancakes even though it was nearly 2 in the afternoon. I ordered fries and stole half his bacon. This is the strangest anniversary meal, he said. We did not get married today. No. We decided not to stop being married. The difference mattered. We wrote new vows privately at the cabin, but we did not promise forever. Forever had once allowed us to postpone attention. I promised to tell the truth before it became silence. Ethan promised to make presence a practice, not a crisis response. I promised not to use leaving as a threat. He promised never to make staying the price of security. We placed the handwritten pages in Rowan's memory box because the marriage that survived belonged partly to the child we lost, and the truth's loss forced us to face. The following year was not magically easier. Ethan missed a counseling session because he misread the calendar. I accepted a promotion without discussing how the new hours would affect childcare. We argued in the kitchen while June threw peas from her high chair. But neither of us disappeared. We apologized, adjusted schedules, and cleaned peas from the floor together. Choosing again was not a single courthouse answer. It was the repeated decision to remain available for repair. Epilogue: the person to call. 5 years later, a nurse asked me for my emergency contact. I was sitting in an urgent care clinic with a fractured wrist after slipping on ice outside the laboratory. June, now 5, sat beside me wearing glitter boots and explaining to everyone within hearing distance that her mother had fallen like a cartoon person. The nurse smiled. "Who should we call?" "Ethan Hayes," I said. June corrected me. "Daddy is teaching today. He can still answer." He did. Ethan arrived 30 minutes later carrying my coat, June's stuffed rabbit, and the insurance card I had forgotten. There was more gray in his hair now. He had become captain of the department's training and professional development division, a promotion he once would have considered less prestigious than homicide command. His division had implemented statewide programs on supervisor coverage, critical incident leave, and family emergency planning. The policy that began as a draft at our kitchen table was now taught to every new command officer in the department. He examined my splint. "How bad?" "Small fracture. No surgery." June tugged his sleeve. "Mom said a bad word." I fell on ice. "You said 2 bad words," she clarified. Ethan nodded solemnly. "Given the circumstances, that seems medically appropriate." The nurse laughed. On the drive home, June fell asleep in the back seat. Ethan reached across the console and touched my uninjured hand. "Do you remember the other hospital?" he asked. "I remember all of it." He no longer apologized every time the past surfaced. Repeated apologies can become another request for absolution. Instead, he allowed the memory to exist. At home, a framed photograph of Rowan's memorial stone stood on the bookshelf beside pictures of June's first day of kindergarten. Grief had not vanished. It had found a place within the family rather than beneath it. Carol came for dinner every Sunday and asked before offering advice. My mother no longer told me to be understanding when she meant silent. Lena remained June's favorite honorary aunt and the only person authorized to mock Ethan's early attempts at cooking. Our marriage was not without conflict. Ethan still became restless when major cases dominated the news. I still interpreted delayed messages through the lens of abandonment. Sometimes therapy returned to our calendar for a few months. Sometimes we slept angry and resolved things after coffee. The difference was not that we stopped failing. We stopped treating failure as permission to disappear. That evening, Ethan made pasta while I sat at the kitchen island with my wrist elevated. June colored beside me, using every marker except the one she needed. "Dad," she said, "Mom says you used to be gone all night." Ethan looked at me. I had answered one of June's questions earlier, carefully and honestly. Children deserve age-appropriate truth, not family mythology. "I was," he said. "Why?" "I thought my job needed all of me." "Did it?" "No," he stirred the sauce. "It needed me to do my part and trust other people to do theirs." June considered this. "Mom needed you." "Yes." "Were you in trouble?" "For a long time." She giggled, then returned to coloring. Ethan brought the pasta to the table and placed my plate in front of me. He had learned to cook 7 reliable meals. The vegetables were never overdone now. After dinner, he washed dishes while June helped badly. Water splashed across the counter. A plate nearly fell. Their laughter filled the kitchen. I stood in the doorway, my cast heavy against my chest. Years earlier, silence had taught me that I could vanish inside a marriage while remaining physically present. Now noise surrounded me, running water, a child's questions, Ethan pretending to be outraged by soap bubbles on his shirt. He looked over his shoulder. "You okay?" "Yes." "Need anything?" The question was ordinary. That was its beauty. "Tea," I said. "And help with my hair. I cannot tie it with one hand." "I can do that." His first attempt produced a crooked ponytail. June declared it terrible. Ethan tried again. I watched him in the mirror, concentrating as though my hair were a complicated piece of evidence. Once, I had told a nurse I had no family because the person legally closest to me had become unreachable. Now my emergency contact was not a title on a form. He was a man who had learned that being needed was not the same as being present, and that love did not live in the dramatic moment when everyone watched. It lived here. In the second attempt at a ponytail. In the tea cooling on the counter. In the phone he answered. In the home he returned to. That night, after June went to bed, she returned carrying the green blanket Carol had made for Rowan. "Is this for the baby who died?" she asked. Children discover family history in drawers, photographs, and conversations adults assume they are not hearing. "Yes," I said. "Was the baby my brother?" "We do not know if Rowan was a boy or a girl." "Rowan was your older sibling." June climbed onto the couch between us. "Why did Rowan die?" "My body had a problem the doctors could not fix in time." She thought about this with the solemn concentration of a 5-year-old. "Was Daddy there?" Ethan's hand tightened around mine. "No," he said. "I should have been, but I was not." "Why?" "Because I made a bad choice about what was most important." June leaned against him. "But you came when Mom fell like a cartoon." "I did." "Good." For her, the moral accounting was simple. Adults made mistakes. They told the truth. They came next time. We folded Rowan's blanket together and returned it to the box. June placed one of her drawings inside, a family of 4 beneath an enormous yellow sun. One figure was a small green star above the others. "That is Rowan," she explained. Later, Ethan and I stood over the box. "I used to be afraid truth would make her think less of me," he said. "What do you think now?" "That secrecy would teach her the wrong lesson. I want her to know love does not make mistakes disappear. It makes us responsible for what we do after them." I closed the lid. Then we went upstairs, where our daughter was calling for water, another blanket, and one final story. Ethan answered first. For more exciting content, please subscribe and follow us.